welcome back. Now, according to a recent Ipsos MRBI poll, 1 in 12 people fear they will lose their homes due to mortgage rate hikes and loss of income.
It's a tough situation for many, but has the property market decline finally begun to bottom out, and how will it help home owners? Joining us now are Aoife Walsh from the Housing Association Respond and Carl Dieter from Irish Mortgage Brokers. You're both very welcome. Thanks for coming in this morning. Aoife, first of all, 1 in 12, that's an alarming statistic.
It is, but I mean, it's pretty indicative of what we're seeing and hearing at the moment. We'd be receiving a lot of calls from people who are both beginning to fall into arrears and those who are actually in very real danger of losing their home. Are
we seeing it sort of go through the motions now? You know, first we heard people are getting into trouble making the repayments, and now this is at the other end of it. They're actually in danger of having their homes repossessed.
I mean, certainly what we do know is that about 13,000 people haven't been able to pay their mortgage for more than 12 months. Now, as many people know, there is actually a code, a statutory code, that governs how lenders treat those in difficulty. Now, according to that code, lenders only need to provide those in difficulty with 12 months, and after that, effectively the gloves are off from the bank's perspective, and they are well within their rights then to actually seek a repossession through the courts. So, I mean, I think 13,000 is the start of it, but I mean, what we're hearing is that there's a lot more in difficulty. Many people have had to renegotiate their mortgage, perhaps gone on interest only, or even taken a payment holiday. So I think once the terms of those agreements end, I think we're going to see a real problem hitting the country.
What are the causes that you're hearing on the phone? Is it that people are losing their jobs, or is it because of mortgage rate hikes, or what are they saying to you on the phone?
It's a combination of both those things. Certainly unemployment is the big factor, but I think in the last week the speculation in relation to interest rate increases has actually terrified people. They're looking at their first wage packet from January. They've seen a decrease of €60, €100, in some cases even more, and now suddenly they're being told their interest could go up, you know, €120 a month in some cases. So it's a case of negative income, negative equity, and basically no support really, or very little support there from the government for these people.
Aoife, do you think the people that may be sort of trying to cope with, you know, that situation there that you've mentioned, what's their best sort of option? Is it to sort of, you know, get onto their lender immediately to try and thrash out some sort of deal? As long as you're paying something, you know, that will help your case. Is that the situation?
Absolutely. It's the first port of call. Talk to your bank. Unfortunately, what we're still seeing is a lot of people burying their heads in the sand, trying to ignore the problem in some cases. But talk to your bank. They are obliged to communicate with you. They are obliged to deal with you. And from what I'm hearing and from my experience is that a lot of those who talk to their banks are actually in a much better position afterwards, you know, in terms of they're looking at their budgeting, they're becoming more financially aware. I suppose in some ways during the good times, during the Celtic Tiger, people weren't used to budgeting. They didn't have to look at their income and outcome every week. I think people are finally beginning to kind of realise the seriousness of a situation, but certainly talk to your bank. They will negotiate with people and they will do everything they can.
But if you have lost your job, you know, is it not the reality that you could struggle to even manage to pay $50 a week off your home loan?
I mean, certainly it is getting more difficult. There is a state support there that is known as the mortgage interest supplement. The only problem with it, which I've been quite critical of in the past, is that the criteria for accessing it is very strict. The government, I think, acknowledging that, did a review of it, and that was published last July. Unfortunately, none of the recommendations have been implemented. So it's nearly 7 months later and no action has been taken. And I think that's actually just an indicative sign of the mortgage crisis. In 2010, a lot of lip service, but very little action.
Carl, last week we saw Permanent TSB and Ulster Bank raise rates. Who's going to be next? Do we know how long it's going to be before there's follow suit?
I can't give a precise measure, but I would say certainly within the first quarter of the year, as other banks see their competitors doing this, that they'll follow suit. And as you've said, it will be hard for people, apart from interest rates and apart from unemployment. We also have higher taxes. So there would have been people that took pay cuts and previously then fell out of the tax net. With the last finance bill, they now find themselves being taxed, higher rates. You've got issues over payment, and it's hitting them from all sides, and that basically feeds into what we've spoken about so far. Precise lenders who will go next, I can't say, but it will be most likely before the end of March.
Well, what's the average, Carl? Say 0.5%. I know permanent TSB sort of went a full percent, which is quite unusual. 0.5% on per 100,000. What would that mean to your mortgage? What would you have to pay back on that? Is it around €30-ish or thereabouts?
Basically, for every 100,000 borrowed over 25 years, it's about €27 per month of a difference, which is why the 1% hike came almost up to €60 in permanent TSB's case. Now, that is bank influenced and bank led. What we haven't really seen yet is the effect that will happen when the ECB start to raise rates. They have been becoming less and less friendly sounding towards a low interest rate environment, and we're starting to see inflation happening when in fact to a degree it doesn't exist, because it's being driven by what they call headline inflation, which factors in food and energy prices. In the USA, the Federal Reserve will use core inflation, which strips those things out and gives you a clearer idea of it. In Europe, we don't. So we might be getting rate hikes while we're still trying to recover, and we have all of these legacy issues to deal with as well.
And then, of course, if the ECB go with the rates, the people that have been insulated on tracker mortgages,
yeah.
they get
passed
it as well.
in.
Yeah. So what advice are you giving to people who may be on the brink, maybe these 1 in 12 who fear they're going to lose their homes? What mortgage advice would you give them? I mean, should they fix? Should they stay on variable? Obviously, they're not to give up their trackers by no means.
I suppose myself and Aoife are very much on the same page in that respect. Call your bank. They do have a new classification called pre-arrears, which means if you believe you're going towards the cliff edge, they'll start to work with you. In the past, they only did that when you were in arrears, after you were already in free fall, and that wasn't really going to help anybody. If it's a case that you're on a variable rate, what I would say is fix that rate at whatever price you can afford for as long as you can. The hard thing is that the best fixed rates in the market don't allow for switching, and a lot of people who would want to switch to get a good rate have negative equity issues, and so they're tied in one place. The banks know that, and so they're driving up the prices. One of our predictions this year is that fixed rates may be removed from the market as well, because they're becoming very expensive to finance. So there's fewer and fewer places to hide, there's fewer and fewer institutions to choose from, there's fewer mortgages available, and at the same time, as I said earlier, you're being hit on all sides: taxation, unemployment, all of these problems, interest rate hikes.
Yeah, it mightn't mean much to the people we've just been talking about, but there were suggestions at the weekend that maybe the property market has actually bottomed out. Did you agree with that?
I don't. I don't agree that price has bottomed out. I would agree that cost has bottomed out. Cost, when you look at buying a house, is a combination of taxation and a combination of the price of money. And money is not going to get cheaper. Money is going to become more expensive. When something is scarce, it's more pricey. The same as a glass of water right here in the studio is a different price than it is in the middle of the desert. The more scarce, the higher the price. We've passed that time. Money will get more expensive, as well as that tax relief at source, which at the moment is being engaged on a first-time buyer at a maximum of 25% of €10,000 per applicant, is going to go down to 15% of €3,000 per applicant. It's about a 70% chop off in that. That is going to make next year's buyer significantly disadvantaged to this year's buyer. So if you're paying attention to price only, you're actually missing the point, unless you're a cash buyer. If you're a cash buyer, wait for the bottom of price. If you're not,
Aoife,
you have to look at everything.
I suppose I'd kind of look at it from an even more simplistic view than that. I think in relation to house prices, you need to look at affordability. Now, the most recent permanent TSB ESRI poll said that the average cost of a house in Ireland is about $191,000. Now, you're still looking at a cost that's, more than 6 times the average industrial wage. I think until we get back to a level that's 4.5, at a push 5 times the average industrial wage, I think we've got further to go.
Okay,
thank you both for that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on this morning. Okay, now with Valentine's around the corner, many couples will soon be shopping for an engagement ring. We'll be showing you how to get 25 to 30% off